Hi there, and welcome to the IBAC Tech Trek Podcast, where we explore the outer reaches of insurance technology. I'm your science officer on this journey and host, Tom Reid, and I'm happy to be joined today by Tom Hickey, CEO at Wedgewood. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Great, Tom. It's good to be here. We got two Toms. It's the best name. So that's something we can agree on to start out.
Exactly. Hey, Tom, um, I'll give you the honor of being Tom One here. Can you give us a background, little bio on yourself and your organization?
Yeah, sure. So I've been 40, this is my 42nd year in the business. I started when I was 8. But no, I went into did a business degree here at Memorial University of Newfoundland, worked at RSA for a little bit while it was still Royal Insurance then. It wasn't even Royal Sun Alliance at that point. And then came back. My dad had a small family brokerage. I think we had 3 employees, and I think our total premium volume was 700,000. Supported a family of 4 on that. That'd be a challenge these days, hey? And so I got into business. Dad sort of eased out. I grew that. And then eventually, Jeff Wedgewood was someone I knew here local. We started working on some accounts together because he had some Lloyd's capacity I needed for some commercial stuff, and one thing led to another. And then we put our 2 businesses together back in 2005, and it's been a fun journey ever since.
Yeah. And you're up to, I think you mentioned before we started recording, about 80 employees these
Yeah,
days?
so we've got this business, and then there's an affiliated adjusting company next door. So yeah, so all told, that's about 80 people. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So you recently did a post on LinkedIn, which I think you prefaced by saying that you don't normally post on LinkedIn, but that you're taking a step back from the organization, step from the day-to-day of the organization and doing some thinking, looking forward. And you made a series of, I'll call them opinionated comments on artificial intelligence. And just disclaimer, what you're about to hear is Tom One's opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. But with 42 years in the business and a good head on the shoulders, I think the opinion is worth listening to. So you wrote a LinkedIn post about artificial intelligence and what you guys have been doing with it, and I was very intrigued. And I thought, you know what, we need to bring you on the podcast and kind of dive into this. So one of the things that I think a lot of brokers are really thinking about, there's so much hype. Like it's just the hype machine is in overdrive. It's hard to move without seeing something about AI. And so to me, the most obvious question is, well, for a Canadian property and casualty insurance brokerage, in your opinion, is AI useful? Yes or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly useful. I just think there's a gap between the reality of and listen, this isn't unique to AI. There's all kinds of when something new comes out, it gets hyped, right? Um, there is tons of use for AI, but I started to see this because when I started to research and I started following people on LinkedIn who, are into AI, and you're trying to learn, and you're reading a lot of articles, and you're talking to people, and you're talking to vendors, and you're just trying to understand where it is because there's so much coming at you, like what's real, what's not, what should I be using, what shouldn't I be using, and those things almost change weekly now because there's so much product coming out. But one thing I did find is that there's a whole bunch of money going into AI, and just forget like the big players like OpenAI or Anthropic. Obviously, that's big, but I mean the vendors who are trying to find, okay, I can wrap something around a Claude backend or write my own program and use my own custom, open source AI, GPT, whatever you want to call it. Um, Most of them don't actually know what they're doing when it comes to our business. So, they don't even know the difference between really a broker and insurer. They don't understand the differences between Canada and the US. Like they don't know what CSIO is. They don't know there's anything but all those kinds of things. So, you get our COO did so many demos with different vendors, and they all had great concepts, but they weren't actually even for us. They didn't understand that, like, we are not an insurer. Like, we don't need a way to automate all our claims intake forms. Like that's not what the broker needs. So I just found, and the claims they would make, I started telling people, well, a specific insurer or a specific broker has reduced their operating costs by 40%. I go, okay, that number got my attention. I'm going to find out about that. Like, how do you do this? And then it turns out it's like 40% of one process that represents a half of 1% of what you do day to day. So it's all this kind of stuff going on. And the reality is that, like anything else, and it's the statements being made by some of these CEOs, 40% of white collar jobs will be replaced by 2026 and 2029 and all those statements. Yet if you look at the other side of the studies, all of them say, well, only 3% of AI implementations actually are producing any ROI. So all those things are completely irreconcilable. So there is too much hype, but you've got to do, if you have to educate yourself to know what to understand what can be done for you and what works for you. And it's actually very simple things. We don't even need to worry about APIs and tying stuff into your BMS. There's a ton of things you can do without getting involved in any of that at this point. And all that stuff will come. And the BMS vendors will build stuff. Whether or not it works for you or not, that's going to be a decision someone has to make, because they make things work with their systems, not what you necessarily do. So there's all kinds of things like that. So that's why I say there's a lot of hype and the pressure to feel like if you're not leading the pack on AI now in 2 or 3 years, you'll be displaced, you'll be out of business, you'll be this. That is hype. That is not true. There's too many regulatory, even if it was true, there's so much regulatory stuff in the middle of all this that I don't think our regulators would even allow that to happen if they wanted it to. So I think everyone's got to look at this. This is another tool. It's revolutionary. It's going to have a big long-term impact, like the iPhone, and you can get all these disruptive technologies that come in at the time that sort of did this, and then they took off. We're into this phase. I think people just have to try and get themselves so they're ready for takeoff. They don't need to take off yet, because you're probably going to have a crash landing and waste a lot of time and money trying to do things that we're probably not ready for yet. So that's when I say it's hype. I think we just got to look at this. This is a business tool, something to help us serve our clients better and run a better business. Let's not make it more than that, at least yet.
So that's great feedback, Tom, and I completely agree with your points about the hype and that the future isn't here just yet, but the future, as always, the future is coming. So you guys got started. There's a lot of brokers based on. Now, I tend to talk to a lot of the brokers who sit on the IBAC Tech Committee or sit on CSIO boards. So, so I typically am talking to brokers who are in that early adopter phase. But, I'll also talk to brokers at a convention or what have you that are in the normal group. And there's quite a big difference between sort of that early adopter group and that normal
group. And I
group.
consider us, I think, an early adopter. Like we've been using, we jumped on Quandary years ago as an example, not promoting Quandary. It's just, that's a tool that's been out there that was built for brokers, that by people who understood what a broker does and integrated it. That's a tool, and it makes your life a lot easier for your personal staff in terms of the time it takes to review policies and find exceptions and do that. That's a useful tool. We've got everybody here, has licenses for different LLMs, we're testing with, and some of them do different things better than others. If you're in Microsoft 365 world, if you got the ability to put basic agents that can do simple things at your tooltips, and there's no programming required. It's actually one of the simpler technologies. I wouldn't even consider it technology. Like if you can type a question, you can use certain facets of AI. So it might be one of the easiest training things beyond getting into vibe coding and all that kind of stuff that we could use. So there's tons of tools out there that are quite easy to use. Just don't expect that this is the stuff that's actually going to transform your business yet. It's a learning curve of getting comfortable with it, right? For a lot of people.
Well, Quandary and Copilot are interesting points, because they're kind of the way I look at it, is kind of two different implementations of AI. Quandary is essentially a robotic process automation tool, which is a form of AI. It's not like the Gen AI of today, but it's still a form of AI. But it is taking over typically taking over tasks that are repetitive, and somebody does them with a tenth of their brain, but they got to get done, right? So you can end up freeing up people. So by using Quandary, you're actually using AI, right? It's not the
You
flashy
don't
open
think of it that
AIs.
way, and that's
Yeah,
what I was trying to explain, like, people are using this, if they use Grammarly, they're using AI. Like, this people we're using it in ways now that aren't necessarily visible, and that's the way it should be. The whole point of it is to make it easier and simpler. If your AI is in your face all the time, you're probably doing something wrong, because the whole idea is it shouldn't, right?
yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of trying to understand how technology works, so that when something goes wrong, at least you have a conception of it, right? It's like your car. If you don't know how a car works and you hear a strange noise, you have to go to a mechanic and pay, the diagnostic fee to find out. It's like, oh, it's a loose bolt. It takes 2 seconds to fix it. If you actually understand something about cars, you can do your own little investigation to decide if you need like a professional to look at it, or if you don't, right? Same thing with technology. If you have some understanding of it. And AI is, and I'm not suggesting anybody gets into the math under AI, because I've seen some of the math. One of my colleagues showed it to me, and yeah. So I have a degree in engineering. I mean, I used to know a lot of math. I looked at that and I went, yeah, no, thank you. I just saw triple integrals and all kinds of like super high end calculus and statistics. And I went, no, thank you. I don't feel like breaking my brain. But the general concepts of how it works, I think, is important. And using a Copilot, or using an OpenAI, using a Chat GPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever, gives you a sense of how it works, because you also see the fact that if you don't do a really good job of your prompting, it'll give you back garbage.
Exactly. It's all about context, right? And, it's really interesting you say that, because, we put probably half our staff through, like, I think almost half the staff have done now a full, like, 35-hour training course on AI. And so then out of that group, we made a committee to say, "Look, let's launch 3 test pilots, stuff that's simple, but that a lot of people can use, not things just that's applicable to one person, because you wanna get some broad adoption uses, so you just get a comfort level with it." And, there is a skill to knowing how to get good output back from it. It's the classic garbage in and garbage out, but I think the difference with AI is it's giving it nothing versus getting stuff back. So it needs full context, and it needs to understand what your business is and what your role is and what your challenges are and what your strategic plan. It needs to know all this stuff to really give you meaningful feedback that's actually really relevant, and not sort of generic stuff that it's learned by crawling websites for a long, long time. So I totally agree with what you're saying, and it's really about starting small with it, and just bringing it down to your level of what you're comfortable with and what you can deal with while you still got a business to run. So it's easy to get pulled in that. That's why I talked about ROI, because what's the point of doing any of this? Like, how much technology have brokers implemented over the years and don't know if they have an ROI? I could make myself do that lots of times, like chasing silver bullets around, right? There's always a silver bullet. This is not any more of a silver bullet than anything else is. Um, it's a tool that needs to be implemented and used properly. And those who get it right, probably, 3 to 5 years from now, will be in a way different position than those who stick their head in the sand. So I'm certainly not. The point of this was never to be that people shouldn't fully engage with it. It's just be realistic about it, and don't fool yourself into thinking things are going to happen 6 months from now that probably won't, unless you're like. There's those of us out there who are got a full tech team, got a strategy around it, know what they're doing, and can implement this stuff. I don't think that represents the majority of people in our business. Certainly wouldn't represent me that well, because our scale, we wouldn't have those resources in house.
It's kind of interesting how you say this, because I'm hearing a lot of how you got started in this. If you had to give some guidance to another brokerage, right? Someone, so not a broker link, not a hub. They probably have teams dedicated to this, but another brokerage who has to kind of you know, li- lift themselves up. What are the first couple of things you look at to advise them to get started
Well,
with?
first of all, you have to have someone in a major leadership role, whether it's the CEO or someone else, has to be committed to this. if the leadership isn't committed to say, we are going to start using AI to run this business or to supplement this business, you can't expect your team to. So there's no point sending all your team off on training and then nobody on your leadership team uses it. For one thing, it's hypocritical. And number two, how can your staff are going to be dealing with things that you have no idea about. So, for me, like, for example, I just started using Claude. Okay. And I had no idea what Claude code was. I had no idea what cowork was. I had no idea what artifacts were. I had no idea what skills were. You're hearing all these buzz terms. And the beautiful thing with learning this is you actually don't have to know any of those things. You go into co-work, and I'll give you one simple example, which is sort of what opened my eyes. So we would love to develop a policy checking agent. I think every broker I talk to would love to have an agent that checks his policies for that. It's the single biggest use. Seems like it's made to order for AI. It's large volumes of PDFs or Word documents or whatever. LLMs are great for scanning that stuff and comparing to them and tell you what's missing or what's not. They're good at that. So I started to look, well, how would we do this? I mean, it's not, you've got pivot issues if you're using an open source AI. Like technically, if you put a deck page on Claude and it has client name, address, blah, blah, you know, is it a real risk? I think it's like about 10,000 times less risky than someone clicking on a phishing email in this company tomorrow. But technically, it will be a PIPEDA violation. We haven't got consent from our clients to use their information for that in that way. At least that's the advice I've gotten. So technically, I said, well, it makes no sense to say we've got to print off every deck page or call up every deck page in Adobe and manually redact information and then put it up, into some Claude thing to check it and then get it back down. And then, like, how do you even know who the policy belongs to? There's no name on it. All kinds of stupid things like that. Like when someone says, well, if we're going to do this, how do we make a sensible workflow out of this? Because the workflow now is an AM or an AE or someone has to sit down and check that policy and confirm it met all our standards and that there's no coverage gaps and everything is covered off. So a very simple process, but manual and long. So I know nothing about programming. So I went into cowork and I said, here's what I want to do. We want to build this workflow. So I've got this problem with redaction. I want to stay in compliance with all our privacy laws and everything else. Like, how do I deal with this? And so it started giving me ideas. And within half an hour, it had written a program in Python, which, like, I know Python is a language, whatever, coding language, but I have never written or know nothing about it. And within an hour, I had a program that would pull stuff out of our Ivan's mailbox. It could tell if it was personal lines or commercial lines because we have Quandary for the personal line side. And it would then go in and redact the name and address. And then now we've got a workflow where now one person I would do is we still have to upload one by each into Claude to get the policy checking done. The next step will be to build something with a Claude API so we can do them in batches. There was no technical knowledge involved. It was just asking it, here's something I want to do. How can you help me with that? And that's how you get the comfort level with it. The worst thing that could have happened was it wrote a crappy program that didn't work. And we had to have our IT involved because to install anything like that, you need to have admin rights in your machine and all that. So someone who knew something about it had to be involved. And they're getting all excited looking at this stuff because they can't wait to be dealing with this because they know what's coming. So that was so simple. And that's a workflow that saves 20 minutes per policy. Okay. I didn't need a BMS integration. I didn't need to call an outside vendor to build anything. Like it as programming goes, it's very simple. But I would never be able to do that, or no one here in our office actually know how to write that code. So they're the things that you can do without. That's what $28 a month Claude subscription to do that, or whatever it costs in US dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I hear that Claude is playing around with moving code to the max tier instead of the pro tier. So
exactly.
I think
Things like that use so few tokens. Like I specifically asked this, like, how expensive is this going to get? Oh, like, I think I have like a minimal limit on mine just for testing. You'll take like months to use up your limit, like for this kind of stuff. Right?
Well, let's talk about the security for a second, but I just want to make a point that because I use Claude as well. and as well as I natively use Gemini because I have Google infrastructure for my team here, but I've gotten into Claude because as I've been hearing a lot of hype about it, started using it, so I want to go learn it, right? But I tend to do some heavy duty graphics and presentations and stuff like that. So I run out of room very quickly. So I've been reading about it, and the one of the issues some of these big AI firms are running into is that they're spending a lot more money than they're taking in, and
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
to be. I think I may have minimized that. It's significantly more money, but
Yes. Well, there's no
so
economic model that exists, yes, of how they're actually ever going to make any money.
no,
That
so
doesn't exist right now.
so they are going to have
Yeah.
to raise prices, right? At some point that's going up. But there is a free lunch today. That free lunch ain't going to exist for forever. So something to consider. But um, the use case you just talked about is really interesting because I actually, for a presentation like a year and a half ago, I used Notebook LM. I brought in, actually had Steve Earle's policy, which happened to be with Aviva. So I brought his policy into Google Notebook LM and the Aviva underwriting manual and had it analyze his policy. And it found a couple of errors on, his own policy. And he said to me, I don't broker my own policy. I'm going to have to go talk to my team. But, but that was a one at a time thing, right? I had to manually pull all the stuff in. And, I've been exposed to a tool that Semiar out of Montreal has built that does these coverage gap finders. And, Koios is doing something where it's looking at like the transcript of a conversation you had with your broker and then validating that against an application. So same kind of thing. It's double checking that people are doing things right. So there is a whole spectrum of how
There's
you can
so
do this.
many creative use cases, and you're totally right. And I was going to mention that about like right now, this is like it is a free ride. I mean, the value you get for you know however many subscriptions you buy for your business, but like those costs, like don't think okay, we're going to get way more efficient, and we're going to have less BM staff at some point and less BMS seats and all the costs. No, you're just going to spend the money somewhere else or more. Like that's just the nature of this bit of technology. Because there's such a crunch on compute, their costs are going crazy. Like you are totally right. The costs of just creating code and use it's going to go up. I don't know what that looks like, but it's a free ride right now.
I think if somebody gives you an opinion on where that number is going to be, they're smoking something interesting because I don't think anybody knows. But if one assumes that a bit of a free ride right now, but if you look forward a couple of years and assume that those costs go up, and at the end of the day you don't actually save anything on your IT, but there's still a return on investment, right?
That's my point. Like that's what I'm saying. Like if you can say, like some things are easy to measure and some things aren't. But when you've got specific clerical task and it takes on average 20 minutes every time you do it or whatever the number is, it's really easy to multiply out your costs versus your investment and see what it is. And that's something that, a lot of people have tried to do over the years is measure your ROI on your BMS. Well, it's almost impossible because there's so many what ifs and it's so pervasive through your business. Unless you did a lot of benchmarking before you ever did it, you have no way of knowing. But something like this, when you start off simple and you say, I need to take really tasks that everybody here hates doing, but they're very necessary from a client point of view to make sure their coverages are right or for E&O protection, whatever, you can really measure your ROI on those things. So if you discipline yourself to say, well, I'm going to implement agents and things like that, and I can tell if it works or not. Like it's black and white. Did I get the time savings I want? You don't have to make it real complicated starting out. And that's how you get buy-in, right? Wow, I didn't think it could do that. Then your staff says, it's really cool. Let's build another one. Here's another really repetitive task we have to do. Help us with that. Like we have zero negativity on that here, at least in our business. That's for sure.
One of the things that I have found over the years, I mean, I spent my first 10 years, give or take, in the insurance business building software for either internal users or for brokers. And most of that was automating jobs that had to get done, but nobody really wanted to do them. They're not fun. right? So, most brokers, frontline brokers especially, they enjoy talking to customers. They do not enjoy the half an hour putting data into portals or double checking this or, ticking all these boxes, right? They want to be able to talk to customers and help them out. And if somebody can magically get rid of the job, they'd be able to talk to customers 3 times more frequently, right?
Yeah.
Today, where's your most important use case for generative
I
AI?
will tell you, and it's nothing to do with what I just talked about. It's leadership. The ability of using some LLM, whatever one you have, I think they probably all do an equally good job of this, is of having the context of what your business is, what your business plan is, um, the personalities of the people on your leadership team, putting that in there. Um, and so when you're having a meeting, like I do this all the time. Every time I go into a meeting, all the meeting prep work and agenda is done in AI. And that builds the agenda. And I literally use it during the meeting to put in the decisions we're making as we go along and get instant feedback like, okay, you did that. But when it has context, it will ask you some really good questions and either help you get clarity on the decision, like who actually owns this, what's the true roadblock in this, and making sure you have compelling events around them, like dates and all that thing. And then you come out of a meeting, you've got such clarity on what it is you actually talked about and what you agreed to. And I think that I haven't done this yet. But one thing I really want to try adding to that is everybody has the AI open together. Everyone has the same set of questions to answer, but everyone has it from their context. So our CFO is going to have all the stuff for his context. What does this impact from the finance side? The marketing person, the operations person, all those, you could ask the exact same prompt to the LLM, and everyone should be getting slightly different feedback compared to what I would get as CEO. So that's how you really start to surface up the things that might be important to all the different stakeholders and and have really more effective, fast, concise, and clear leadership meetings and make decisions way quicker. I think in the near term, that is the single best use I've seen for AI because you're making big decisions. They have huge impacts on your business, way more than getting your policies checked 20 minutes faster. Like that's all great operation stuff. But at the leadership level, it's your ability to move fast and make good decisions and have really clarity on what's involved with those decisions. And the clarity and having it so it's challenging what you're thinking, not telling you every time you do something, oh, that's a great insight, boss. Making sure you've got it set up so it's like mine, like it doesn't agree with anything I want to do, but it's I've trained it to really challenge me on everything. Because you're in your own headspace. We've all got our own biases and the way we view the world. It may not that's not necessarily reality, right? So I've found for me, leading executive team meetings like that's shortened the meetings as well and made them way more productive. And like you're just going from one thing to other with complete clarity. Everyone knows what's decided. Everyone knows what they got to do. Everyone's issues get put on the table. So I actually want to add one more document to it because it means you need to have a business profile in there, you need a strategic plan in there, and you need all the status of your plans and where you are on with them, right? I'd want to add one more piece of that is for each person, like what their actual biases are. What are the things that they don't say and that they can't say? If your LLM also knows that, like how much better is your feedback going to be? So that's really where my head's gone with it for the last 2 months. The other stuff will just come. Like that's technical stuff that we'll get to but you can do this, like you can decide, well, I'm doing that. And with a month from now, have your whole leadership team totally AI driven. There's a book guy Jeff Woods wrote called The AI Driven Leader. And that's what opened my mind to that. I sat in on one of the CEO masterminds, but I sat on a meeting. He was a presenter and like, it was like a light bulb went off in my head of how to properly do prompts And he said, the strongest thing you could do is just take a sticky pad like this and put it on your computer. Like, can I do this with AI? And I do that. And now every time, after a while, next thing you know, you realize, like, as a leader, you know, when you're not in your BMS all day and you're not dealing with all that stuff, you can do almost all your job and have AIs be a part of it as an executive advisor, I would call it. And it's incredibly powerful, but you had to put the time into using it so it gets to know your context, right? So some of the people here in our leadership even knows their AI starting to have names and things like that. Oh, I was talking to Norman, or I was talking to Fred, whatever it is, you know, because they're developing these weird and sick little relationships with their AI. I won't even go there on that one. But no, in all seriousness, no, though, it really, I think that's the easiest thing. Like, if you were like running a brokerage, you want to get a feel for what you do with AI. I think if you just started with that, within 60 days, like, your eyes will be opened. And then all the other things will flow, because then you can start thinking to yourself, well, geez, if I can use it for that, this sort of high level stuff, surely, God, my team can use it as well. So I think that's the easiest place to start.
The world of insurance is changing because the world of tech is changing. Join us on the journey at ibactech.ca.